Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hi, this is Celine Williams, hosting from Ontario for Canada's podcast. My guest today is John Bromley, who's the founder and CEO of Charitable Impact. After a decade of working in corporate finance and charity law, John founded Charitable Impact to transform how Canadians experience giving. Welcome, John.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are now. Corporate finance seems like an interesting journey to charity law, let alone into starting your own business.
Yeah, well, I usually tell this story by starting at the beginning when I was raised in a family that valued charitable giving. It's something that my parents talked about that they, caused me and my sisters to experience. Right? They also modeled it for us. It's just something they did. That's all. And as I grew up, I was a normal kid. And when I went to university, some reason I went into commerce, and I sort of fell in love with macro level, finance. I wasn't particularly good, by the way, at getting the answer right. My math skills aren't as good as they should be. But I started to understand that I was a bit of a systems thinker, and I really loved the economy and finance through that lens. So, I went in and worked in corporate finance, sort of capital markets, type of thing, and gained a lot of financial fluency. Loved just learning, about that part of the world. Wasn't a great culture fit though for that work. It turned out after 5 or 6 years, which was important for me to recognize. I'm actually really grateful that I was able to sort of see that and had the courage, looking back at it, had the courage to leave. That's when I started kind of interfacing with my dad. So same guy who raised me, with my mom in this family that valued charitable giving, but like he happens to be the pioneer of charity law. So like my background in charity law is first of all, I'm not a lawyer, but was like working with him and advising exclusively in that space, focused on two major areas. If you're a person, what I refer to as a charity entrepreneur, and you want to understand what structures help you to help you architect the corporate structures behind carrying out your vision. I've got a ton of experience in that. Our business did that. The other thing we did was we worked with donors to help them structure their giving. How to give, what to give, when to give, how much to give. More about the strategic side of that, not so much the fundraising. Hey, you should send it to this charity versus that charity. We're not very involved in that type of work. So through that experience, I learned a ton about charitable giving, a topic that there isn't really many places to go to learn about. Mm-hmm. By the way, it's one of the biggest problems in the sector, for what it's worth. And through those experiences, I recognized how there was effectively nowhere to go to get objective, experienced giving advice as a person, as a Canadian who wants to create change in the world. And through that realization, combined with my general subject matter expertise that was continuing to grow at the time, still grows today. I said, look, let's start Charitable Impact. And Charitable Impact is it's kind of like a charity bank. We service, and we're designed to help donors, regardless of how much money they have to give away, and regardless for what causes or charities they want to give to, right? So we work for you, the donor. We help you understand and get your stuff done, but we're not going to tell you, where to give the money. Those for you to decide, right? So not unlike a bank, we go and help you with things like a mortgage at the bank, but we don't tell you what house to buy. So the charity bank helps you understand what you can do and how to do it effectively, but we won't tell you what charity to give to.
So tell me a little bit more about that. And I'll give you the context for why I'm asking this question. I think of people who, one of the things that I'm sure I guarantee you're familiar with, is people saying, well, I don't know how pick insert charity name is spending the money. I don't know that it's not going to these salaries that we've heard that have been in the media, where someone has 14 houses and is driving 8 Ferraris at once, or whatever the case may be, as opposed to the money going to the charity. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I'm talking about. I think there's often a lot of confusion and uncertainty around things like that. And it sounds like that's some of what you're talking about, that Charitable Impact provides information on. But tell me more about, like, like what it helps with or how it helps for those of us who are like, well, I mean, I think this sounds like a good charity, but I don't really know how they're spending my money.
Well, so what you're talking about there, I think, is two things. One is like it's this recognition that there's not a ton of charity literacy, right? And so then when we read a story about maybe the CEO of some charity that does drive 14 charities and doesn't do that because they invested into Bitcoin, because you don't always know how people made their money, to be frank, right? It may that he or she just may be an incredible investor, but so some of that's about charity literacy, right? And in which case, Charitable Impact would be there to help support you as you explore understanding things better. Like if you said to me, "Is it a problem that fraudulent activity inside charities, is that generally a problem in the Canadian charity sector?" I'd tell you no. If you said, "Well, does fraud ever happen?" I'd say yes, right? But it's not something a huge thing to be worried about in my experience. But the other thing you're kind of talking about there is like what level of confidence do we have, as donors? And like, if you're really confident in the kitchen, you can like really, pull stuff together and make a wonderful meal out of very, very little. If you're confident in a sport, you can do all these things and it attracts you to do it more, and you engage, you bring your friends in, you can have a lot of fun doing it. So donor confidence is relatively low, I would say, in Canada. And I think it's largely low because of illiteracy about knowing how the charity system works and being able to identify good charities. And in this context, Charitable Impact, our business is there to help you as a donor walk through and understand those things. Generosity is something that's very pervasive in a lot of cultures, including Canada. There's a lot of generosity, but people don't know how to channel their generosity towards creating the change they want to see in the world. And that's really what we're here to support them to do.
So how do you do that? What kind of support does Charitable Impact provide? What does that look like?
So great question. So we give you, there's sort of a tool answer, and then there's a services support, human help answer. Let me just take you briefly through both. So when you sign up for at Charitable Impact, and you can do it online, we're a web-based business. It takes 30 seconds to create an account. What you're creating is what I would say is like a bank account just for charitable giving. Charity nerds would recognize it as what's called a donor advised fund. So you're creating this giving fund for yourself. You can then put money into it, use a credit card, use publicly traded securities, use cryptocurrency. You can donate into it with whatever you want. We help you get that done, but if the credit card's done automatically online, for example, and then the money goes into your account, you're issued a tax receipt automatically. And then that money sits there until you're ready to send it away to a charity of your choice. And every single registered charity in the country exists in the Charitable Impact platform, right? So what we do there is we provide a tool that's like a bank account tool to donors, and it's helpful to them because, first of all, being able to separate your donation from the decisions you make about how to spend that money over time is a very, very fundamentally important thing, in my view, to be sort of more strategic over time, to gain confidence about your giving, right? I know I want to give $1,000 this year, but I don't know what charities to give to yet. So put it in your Charitable Impact account. You got your $1,000, you got your tax receipt, and now, go about doing your research, talk to your friends, whatever, get confident about the charities that you might choose, and then send them the money, right? Do so anonymously if you want, and so we give all the tools to the donor to help them manage and carry out their giving, whether they know exactly what they're doing, what charities to give to, or whether they're not yet sure.
Right.
And then the service layer on top of that is like, hey, like, give us a call and we can walk you through what you're trying to achieve. I mean, maybe you're someone that knows you want to support a cause like health, specifically ALS, kind of Lou Gehrig's disease, for example, but you don't know what charities to go after, and we might help you think through how to approach that problem. We might have some connections to introduce you to, and things like that. Let me just give you a quick analogy. It's not perfect, but a lot of people know that they want to invest money for retirement and things like that. So they know they want to save and make investments, but they don't know what stocks to buy. So you go and you find a financial advisor, you go and you find an investment manager, right? These are normal things to do. Well, where's the charity version of that? right? We're providing that type of service. It's a donor-centered, objective service that's really about helping the person we're talking to or the corporation we're talking to achieve their own charitable goals.
Got it. And it sounds like you work with charities and organizations in some way as well in helping them achieve, or have I just taken something too far based on what you said? Because when you said achieve their goals, it sounds like you work with them as well. Is there an element of that?
Well, if you said, is Charitable Impact charity focused or donor focused? The answer would be very clearly donor focused, right? So charities don't come to us and they say, hey, we've got a fundraising campaign and we're trying to raise $5 million from people in Toronto. And we go, oh, here's what you should do.
Right.
But if a donor came to us and said, hey, I want to give $5 million away, how can I structure that? What should I do? We would work with the donor more than the charity. Now, we've done over $1 billion through Charitable Impact. We've got tens of thousands of Canadians who use the platform, accounts as big of tens of millions of dollars in one account. And yet, both of my kids who are 10 and 11 years old, have impact accounts, and my wife and I give them a charitable allowance every month, right? So we have lots of small accounts, lots of donors. Some donors give more money away. Some donors give less money away. We're really focused on helping those people. But all those people, the only way the money can ever leave the system is for it to go out to a registered charity, right? Inevitably, we end up talking with and dialoguing with and having some strategic conversations with charities. But the purpose of our platform isn't to help charities raise money, it's to help people give money.
Got it. That makes sense. So it's very focused on so I'm actually going to ask this question rather than make the assumption. It sounds like there is that lack of, I think you called it charitable literacy, but I would say, education in general around charity. And I think that it sounds like the way that you were raised, that was very much part and parcel of your childhood and what mattered to your parents. I think there's a lot of people who they don't have that, and they don't even know what they don't know. Right? There's that, I don't even know a question to ask because I just don't know what I don't know. So is any piece of this educational outside of a service specifically of me saying, I want to give money to ALS, but if I'm I don't even know where to start? Yeah.
So thanks for asking that question, not making the assumption, because you've actually nailed something really important. And as an entrepreneur, I would say the biggest challenge we face in Charitable Impact is related to what I'm calling charity literacy, right? In other words, the problem isn't, Canadians aren't generous. Canadians don't want to give of their time or their talent or their money to help create the type of change they want to see in the world. That's not the problem. The problem is knowing how to go about doing that, right? So for example, what's a charity? Do people even know? I mean, I know professionals in the sector that barely even know the answer to that question, right? So charity literacy is a function of financial literacy. And I don't know what your position on how progressed you think Canadians are on financial literacy. But if you think it's at all problematic, charity literacy is way worse, right? So a huge part of what we spend our time and money on is actually related to education. And we think it's very missional, right? This is what's cool, because the mission is to increase access to and participation in giving, right? And in order to increase access, we created this donor advised fund that applies to everyone and it's free to use. So it's you don't have an excuse that you don't have a great tool anymore, right? Because it's right there and it's free. But then to increase participation, it's really a function of education, right? And how to bridge that gap between this human truth of generosity towards the action of actually starting to carry it out by, for example, I don't know, just going, well, can I afford $50 a month to give away? If the answer is yes, open up an impact account with Charitable Impact, put $50 in, automated donation from your credit card into your account, and then spend. Now it's automatically happening, right? Every month it's going in, you get in your tax receipt, and then spend all your time just thinking about, what matters to me? Is it climate change? Is it health? Is it relieving poverty? Right? Is it helping kids get into sport? I don't know, whatever you're into, right? So the education part of our experience as a company and my experience as an entrepreneur is huge, and arguably, um, not arguably, definitively, I was too slow in figuring that out. It's one of the weaknesses of having such sort of depth and subject matter expertise is it takes a little longer to figure out that people, in your words, don't know what they don't know. And once I was able to figure that out, it made the educational focus at Charitable Impact as an organization a very central focus.
So I want to explore that a little bit because um I imagine that when you have the kind of context and education that you have to be aware of some of these things, you step into it very differently than someone who is like, I just don't know what I don't know. So what were some of the lessons that you learned in growing? Because I mean, congratulations on the size of Charitable Impact and the number of people that are involved and the amount of money that's I mean, it's huge. $1 billion is huge. So congratulations on that. And I imagine, like all businesses, not all of it was straightforward and easy. And there were things that you had to learn along the way, or assumptions that you were making, or, lessons that you had to take a step back and then move forward. So what were some of those things for you that someone else who is looking at starting any kind of business, but especially if it's maybe something that they're super familiar with, that they can learn from?
Well, we're more of a market creating kind of business, as opposed to going into an existing market and just it's like, and the reason I say that is because like, if I meet somebody who knows what a donor advised fund is, and it's like meeting a unicorn, right? It's like, really? Are you lying to me right now? And then I can ask a couple questions to test, right? But effectively, like charity literacy is so low. So like one of the big lessons which we should explore here, but that I've already sort of put out there was like in the context of market creation, just you think about all the stuff you're told to think about from business blogs and textbooks and things, right? Who's your target audience? But sometimes you forget to think about what your target audience might know, right? So like we could tell you who our target audience is, and we can, I could draw a general rough strategic plan on how to identify people who are going to be more likely to be charitable, right? But you don't. But then you kind of go, oh well, what might they know about charity today? And so that was an area of failure for Charitable Impact. And actually, despite all the success that we've had, the majority of that success has come from serving people who are already very charitably engaged and know enough and can recognize that, like, gee, when they're giving to 5 or 6 different charities and committing a certain a budget, having this like dedicated service and this account just to manage all their charitable giving is super useful. And so then they use it, right? And then when they figure out we actually know what we're talking about and we're kind of quote sophisticated, right? Oh, like I can give private company shares into my impact account. Oh, I can work with my investment advisor at name the wealth management firm to have them manage the funds in my account before I send them out to the charities of my choice, or I want to do that over several years. And the answer to that is yes. Then the numbers can grow, right? Because now people who are giving $100 might give 100,000 or $1 million. Biggest donations we've dealt with are in the tens of millions of dollars, a single donation, and yet you can also go in with a credit card and donate $5 into your account. So like really sort of having true empathy for where your target audiences are in their journey of what you're quote selling, in our case a charity bank experience, a charity bank account kind of concept, is something that if I could go back in time, I would focus way more on that, and I would spend a lot more time and money on for example, in our case, the onboarding and nurturing experience that you go through when you sign up, right? And so here we are 10 years later, $1 billion, billion, 2, 3 in, right? And it's like, oh, let's go and start building that now, right? So it's never too late. You always got to fix your problems. But man, I wish I had a lot more empathy for the true state of charity literacy at the time when I started.
But I appreciate that. And this is also one of those things where you didn't know what you didn't know. Right? That's the benefit of the lesson and being able to change it now and to make have a different impact going forward. And
100%. You're totally right. I didn't know what I didn't know. You're bang on.
I think I appreciate you acknowledging it, because I think a lot of times people hesitate to acknowledge the things that they didn't know. And I often say that we're successful despite ourselves. We can end up successful in some ways despite all of the things that we don't know. And then you're like, oh, okay, but if I want to go to the next level, if I want this to grow to the next size of charitable impact, I probably have to fill in some of those blanks of what I don't know now.
Yeah, well, and that's maybe where the blessing of my errant, entrepreneurial ways are can be blessings, right? Because Canada is a relatively small, well, very big country, but there's only 35 million of us or whatever, right? Relatively small economy. Just by way of example, in the charity economy, Canada is about $18 billion a year given away annually by Canadians. Okay, that number sort of fluctuates between 15 and 20, depending on how you measure it. But okay, guess how big that number is in the United States? It's like 500 billion annually, right? And it's not that they're nicer people, more generous. There's some cultural differences. There's some, socioeconomic stuff. There's some political differences, but ultimately it's just because there's just a ton more people down there, right? So in this where I'm going is in the context of sort of a $20 billion annually, charitable impact having got to $1 billion is actually quite an accomplishment. The accomplishment is with Canadians who actually participated and gave us the chance to serve them as donors for what it's worth. But if we had done such a critically awesome job at educating early on, and the risk would have been growing actually too quickly, and then not actually being able to provide that level of service that we wanted to the relatively large numbers of people still who are using us. And so the blessing sometimes, like especially in this world where everything's always about growth, right? And TAM and all these fancy business terms, is that sometimes you can forget, and I think entrepreneurs forget too much. In the last couple of years have been examples of this, that you're really there to serve as an entrepreneur, right? And if you make money out of service, fantastic. That's a wonderful thing, but you really are there to serve your audience. And you have to also appreciate how much more hard it is to serve, hordes and scales of people than it is to serve a relatively small thing. So the blessing of my errant, entrepreneurial of my mistakes is that they actually let us breathe and mature, over the years to get us to the point today where we're totally talking about scale all the time at Charitable Impact inside our shop. But whereas and we can deliver on it. Whereas I don't know, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, it was more of a pipe dream.
Right. I mean, the joy of being an accidental entrepreneur in some ways, right, is that there are some real upsides. And the fact that you are able to talk about scale and these things kind of happened as an errant entrepreneur, I believe is what you said. It's pretty incredible. And you've designed something that is entirely about service and generosity, and in an entirely new market that, to your point, how many people know what a donor impact, I didn't even get the name right.
Donor advised fund.
Donor advised fund. There we go. I was like, I am getting the name wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, you said something also interesting there, just because you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, right? So, or people who are interested in it, or maybe are listening. So I'm an errant entrepreneur in that, I make mistakes, and the faster you can learn to love mistakes, the better. The advice is just learn to love mistakes and then and criticism and take responsibility for it, right? Even if you're not directly associated to it, it doesn't matter. Just take responsibility. But I'm also an accidental entrepreneur, and you use that term too. I'm accidental in that, like, I didn't like grow up wanting to be an entrepreneur. I didn't. It wasn't my life's plan to become a quote entrepreneur. I accidentally slid got there because I was going, here I am, this like subject matter expert on charitable giving. I can give you advice in my sleep on this kind of stuff. Like, I'm bad at a lot of things, right? But I'm really good at that. And
so like all of us, you're human and bad at more that you're good at. That makes sense.
Oh, dude, if we talked about all the things I'm bad at, we would be talking all day long. So I'm super bad at lots of things, right? Like, like I could have a better golf swing. You know what I'm saying? But like, I could make more shots from the free throw line. But in the charitable, consulting space, I'm like really, really confident, and I make mistakes too, but I'm really, really comfortable and confident. And the accidental part of the entrepreneurial journey was just recognizing that, like, there's really nowhere to go to get objective giving advice, either as a charity entrepreneur, someone who has a mission to save the whales or whatever you want to save, and even as a donor, there's nowhere to go. Generally speaking, I mean, I'm not totally unique, right? But like, so like the accidental part of the business was kind of going, geez, like, what are we going to create a big lineup to our consulting agency? Like, forget that. Let's get more people being charitable. And so that's where the accident came from, was kind of going, oh yeah, my subject matter expertise is actually useful to scale a solution because I already know what the answer is. It's a donor advised fund that's built on web technology that comes with sophisticated objective advice. And then it's like, oh crap, here we are doing it.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of, because of the expertise that you have, I think your story is common in this way. Because of the expertise that you had, now yours was maybe more unique than the average person's expertise in some ways, right? Around this background in finance and then working in charity law, but not as a lawyer. But so like it's unique, but I do think the commonality is, like, a lot of people who have some area of expertise, you see a gap. And even if your goal from being a child has not been, I want to be an entrepreneur in these ways, and I want to run a business, and you see a gap and you see a problem, and you're like, well, I guess I'm the one who's going to have to figure out solving it since no one else is looking at the problem. And a lot of entrepreneurs are accidental entrepreneurs for that reason. And I think that part of your story is far more common than a lot of us want to admit.
Very well said. I knew the solution to a widely held common problem, and I just couldn't not do it. Right. That's the accidental story of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Lucky for me, by the way, that there's not a lot of charity experts out there, right? Because it's like, why am I even saying this? Okay, but like, I tell you a story. When I lived in Montreal, because I went to McGill and I started playing ultimate frisbee and so I'm 45 now. So that in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was living in Montreal and I was playing a lot of ultimate frisbee. And I joke now about, like, because I played at this high level. I played at one of the, like, on the top team in Montreal. They're called Mephisto, and I joke now about how, like, I was able to make that team because no one really played ultimate frisbee. If I had to compete today against all the real athletes who are out there playing ultimate frisbee, I'd be going, I don't think I would have made the team. I mean, I hope that, by the way, becomes true in the charitable giving space. I hope that Charitable Impact and others, like us, are sort of pioneering this space to attract more intelligent, dedicated, missionally driven minds, hearts and minds and wallets, hearts, minds, and wallets to the sector. And for them to figure out, first of all, like, it's not just like being charitable is the right thing to do. Like, I happen to agree with that, but that's not all that interesting. What's interesting is, like, being charitable is kind of cool and it's fun, right? You just can't really recognize it because you're not even recognizing that, like, the time you're spending coaching your son's soccer team or something like that is actually giving, right? And you learn, and there's something in it for you, notwithstanding the fact that there's something in it for them. And as people start to, and then in the business community, like, gee, by like reducing the amount of harm we're making, we can actually, give back in this outsized way, or by purposefully, creating a culture that, includes something like an employee giving program in it, so that when people come, they have benefits that include the charitable side of lived experience of life, then that will get integrated more, and then more bright minds, more glowing hearts, more big wallets come into the sector, and a guy like me will become a dinosaur, and I'll and hopefully I'll pat myself on the back for that.
Well, John, in the most respectful way, I hope that you become a dinosaur and you get to pat yourself on the back and all of these things come true.
I hope my kids one day listen to this very podcast so that they can say, Dad, you're already a dinosaur.
Perfect. You can just take that clip
but thank you. I hope to become a dinosaur too, sooner rather than later, right? Like, and that's the other thing that I think entrepreneurs need to remember is like, it's not just building a business and trying to make a go at making some money. It's actually like creating pathways to and with the future, right? Yeah. And you can't always know where those pathways are going to lead, and you have to accept that it's not for you to create every pathway.
Yeah, I mean, if any of us could predict the future and know what those pathways were, we would all be doing something very different than what we're doing today, and we'd be billionaires, all of us, because wouldn't that be a lovely skill to have?
Oh, I would have bought Bitcoin in 2008 and sold it in 2019.
See? Exactly. Before we wrap up, John, is there anything that we didn't get to that you want to talk about or that you wanted to emphasize inside of the conversation we did have?
Well, I mean, if I can like put my sort of sales hat on, but serious, missional driven one, I would just say like anyone listening to this podcast, like you all have something that you want to create change for. Please just stop for a minute and think about what that might be, right? This is this cause level. And you all of you have something to give towards creating change for this cause that you care about, right? Whether it's your time, whether it's your talents, the things you're good at, or the money that you have. And the last thing I want people to test, okay, that I believe is that when you actually give, you get something in return, right? So giving is about other people, but we also have to start recognizing what it does for us, how it lets us carry out a life mission to help, three-legged dogs or whatever you're into, like whatever cause you're into, right? So please just think about that and try to incorporate it into your life. Our goal at Charitable Impact is to make giving a lifestyle. It actually is a lifestyle for people. They just don't necessarily recognize it, and if that's what if that sort of message resonates with you, we'd love it if you checked us out at charitableimpact.com and, reached out, talked to us, or just signed up and started using our account. If you love it, please keep using it. If you don't, let us know why, and we'll do our best to fix it.
Amazing. Thank you, John. There will be links to Charitable Impact in the show notes, and you can follow them at We Are Charitable on all socials. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And to everyone who is listening, thank you for listening to Canada's podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe to all our channels to get the latest podcasts from entrepreneurs across Canada.